Hello, everybody, and good morning. My name's Don Arleth, and you're watching World News, coming to you live from Warsaw here on TVP World. Presidents, ministers, and top officials from around the world have arrived in the Czech Republic for one of Europe's largest security conferences, the GLOBSEC Forum. This year's edition will feature an address by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and comes as the war in Ukraine ramps up with no ceasefire in sight, all while Europe scrambles to beef up defense spending amid changing ties with Washington. Our defense correspondent, Zuzana Jurek, is in Prague and joins us now. Good morning, Zuzana. So what's the latest from where you are?
Good morning, Don. So, as you mentioned, the forum today is predominantly focusing on the postulates and the arguments made by politicians and policymakers. This included a keynote speech from the Czech president this morning, Petr Havel, who underlined that Europe must put a greater impetus towards its own defense readiness and, more importantly, defense responsibility. Now, at the time when we're speaking, President Zelenskyy is also delivering his keynote address. Amongst other key key policymakers will be the Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić, who will deliver his address about Balkan expansion later in the afternoon. And in terms of the key themes which we expect to be touched upon today, this includes European defense readiness, particularly as this summit comes shortly after the Rearm Europe plan being published. So that includes focusing on European and pan-European defense capabilities and procurement. Also, this summit, or this forum rather today, comes just before the NATO summit in The Hague, scheduled for the end of June, where policymakers will be pushing for a greater defense spending across the NATO allies. This is something that has also been touched upon today, and we expect many more conversations to focus on exactly that, as well as addressing the outstanding capability gaps within the NATO alliance, which have not been addressed during the previous summits in the years gone by. Back to you in the studio.
Okay, Zuzana Jurek reporting there from Prague. Thank you for that report, and we'll be checking in with you later. Thanks. Now moving on, Ukraine and the effects of Russia's continued aggression. 14 people, including 4 children, have been wounded in Russia's latest attack on Kharkiv. According to the city's mayor, Ihor Terekhov, the strike targeted residential buildings, schools, kindergartens, and civilian infrastructure.
Terekhov stated that Russia flew 12 drones on Kharkiv, 11 of which detonated in the city. The one unexploded UAV was found by Ukrainian authorities after landing on a roof of a warehouse. The attack damaged a school, kindergarten, and several residential buildings in several districts of the city. As a result of the drone strike, cars, schools, and houses caught fire. The attack on Kharkiv came just a day after a previous Russian drone strike on the city, which killed 3 people and injured at least 64 others.
German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has arrived in Kyiv to meet with Ukrainian officials. Their meeting will center around additional military aid and the current situation in Ukraine.
The announcement of the German minister's arrival was made public on social media by the German press agency DPA. Before his trip, Pistorius said his main objective is to find out more about the current situation on the Ukrainian front lines and in the cities. He also added he's hoping to speak to government officials about coordinating continued cooperation between Berlin and Kyiv, specifically matters detailing Germany providing Ukraine with crucial military aid as the country fights off intensifying Russian aggression.
The European Union could move ahead with imposing price caps on Russian oil without U.S. support, said the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Kaja Kallas. She also said that the new 18th package of sanctions will include more restrictions on energy, banking, and will hit supply chains Russia requires to continue the war.
it is important, of course, what we do together, but it's also equally important for us what we do alone, because we alone are also a player. If you think about the oil going through the channels, it's mostly, I mean, Europe. It's via the Baltic Sea, it's via the Black Sea. So actually, you know, even if the Americans are not on board, we can still do it and have an impact. Now the sanctions will hit more the supply chains of Russia needed to really fund this war. On the 18th package, we also have the banking, transaction ban and much stronger steps.
According to the Ukrainian General Staff, Russia has suffered over 1 million personnel losses since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022. This figure includes soldiers who have been killed, wounded, or taken into Ukrainian custody. Since the beginning of this year alone, Russia's losses exceeded 200,000 people, with the Russian army losing nearly 1,300 soldiers daily. Ukrainian officials report that during the past 3 years, Russia also lost nearly 10,000 tanks and over 29,000 artillery systems. According to Kyiv, Russia's losses increase with each year of the war. In 2022, the Russian army lost over 106,000 people, which is about 340 per day. That number rose to over 250,000 in 2023. So far in 2024, the trend stayed the same, and Ukrainian statistics indicate that the Russian war machine has lost over 430,000 people on the front lines. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski and his counterparts from the VHimar Plus format are set to meet in Rome on Thursday. The focus of the meeting will be the latest updates on the situation in Ukraine. Foreign ministers from Poland, Germany, Britain, France, Italy, and Spain will be joined by the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and the EU's chief diplomat, Kaja Kallas. The meeting will be hosted by the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. The ministers will hold joint press conference in the afternoon. The focus of the discussions will be transatlantic security and further support for Ukraine. This marks the 6th meeting under the VHimar Plus format, which was first launched in Warsaw, Poland in November of 2024. The Danish parliament is backed a bill on Wednesday allowing the United States military bases on Danish soil. Earlier this year, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance visited America's Bidufik base in Greenland, a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark. This legislation widens a previous military agreement made in 2023 with the Biden administration, where U.S. troops had broad access to Danish air bases in the country. President Donald Trump has said he wants to take control of Greenland, which is rich in rare earth minerals. Critics say the parliamentary approval cedes Danish sovereignty to Washington. Sweden has been hit hard by a mass cyber attack campaign over the past week, according to the country's officials. Now, Swedish banks and government agencies were targeted. The country's prime minister said that it isn't certain yet who the perpetrator was, but that Swedish security services are pointing out that similar attacks are often carried out by Russia, Iran, and China.
The honest answer is yes, Sweden is under attack in the sense that there are enormous, extensive cyber attacks going on at all times. The Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency is working on this issue, as well as the national broadcaster. Banks and a lot of other organisations are dealing with the same problem. I recently met our British colleagues at their National Cyber Security Centre, and we're now building a Swedish equivalent led by the National Defence Radio establishment. We attribute blame only when we are 100% sure. The security service does often point out that Russia, Iran and China are the three countries systematically doing things like this.
In Washington, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told Congress that Russia is clearly the aggressor in the war in Ukraine. When asked whether Moscow would stop at Ukraine, he responded that it remains unknown. The hearing highlighted growing concern among lawmakers when Senator Mitch McConnell questioned which side the United States supports in the conflict. Hegseth emphasized that the administration remains committed to achieving peace, even if the outcome may not satisfy all political factions. Senator Lindsey Graham pushed back, warning that Vladimir Putin has made it clear that he intends to go beyond Ukraine. Graham even compared present-day Russia to the rise of Germany in the 1930s. The defense secretary also confirmed that the 2026 U.S. defense budget includes reduced military aid for Ukraine, reflecting what he described as a shift in the administration's approach to the conflict. The government of Kosovo says it has agreed to a deal with Washington to receive 50 migrants a year who are to be deported from the United States.
Kosovo already has a deal in place with Denmark to host 300 prison inmates from the Scandinavian nation beginning in 2027 in return for €210 million over the next 10 years. The US is searching for partners to receive third-party nationals as it seeks to deliver on President Donald Trump's promise of record-level deportations. Relations between the two countries are strong, with many Kosovars holding the US in high regard after it led support for independence from Serbia in 2008.
Poland's national football coach, Michał Probierz, has announced that he is stepping down from the role. The decision follows days of controversy, with Poland's star player Robert Lewandowski refusing to play for the side after Probierz on the weekend stripped him of the team's captaincy ahead of a key 2026 World Cup qualifier match on Tuesday. Probierz came under fire from some of his handling of Lewandowski, while several former Polish national teams players backed him. Despite the White and Reds losing the game against Helsinki 2-1, the Polish Football Association on Wednesday still backed the coach. But in a statement issued earlier on Thursday, Probierz said that the current situation had come to the conclusion that the best decision for the good of the national team would be for him to resign his role. And now joining me to discuss this development this morning is John Carter, our very own sports expert and a football man. Please, John, thank you for joining us. And tell me, with this Probierz, I mean, many of us were shocked to see that he was didn't want Poland's most famous, most wide-known, and best player to play to be the captain for the national team. So what happens next here in this saga?
Well, obviously they'll be scouting around for a new coach. I mean, that's the primary objective. I think obviously they'll be looking for someone to appease Lewandowski to a certain extent, someone that he'll be able to get on with, because the 2026 World Cup is very likely to be Lewandowski's final major tournament. And so they're going to want a coach who's going to, be able to get on well with him, to inspire him, and to inspire the other key players. So we haven't had any kind of speculation just as yet as to who the successor might be. If we go back to when Probierz was originally appointed, it was down to a final two of Marek Papszun and Probierz, and of course they opted for Probierz back in 2023.
I'd like to go back to this decision that was made. I mean, you know, as we were reporting it here on TVP World and as the Polish press was reporting it, I mean, what would have gotten into the mind of anybody in charge of Poland's national team to strip the captaincy away from Lewandowski?
Well, I assume that it was done with the thought that Lewandowski had become a disruptive influence on the squad. Now, we don't know any of this information officially, but there were a lot of murmurings that he was kind of sulking all the way back in March when there was a training camp, and that he was becoming a slightly disruptive figure. And if that was the case, and you can certainly see that on the pitch, at times he's kind of throwing his arms in the air and getting rather frustrated that perhaps the other players aren't meeting his high standards. Now, if you have that situation, it's obviously going to reduce morale, players are going to start to feel a bit more unsettled, and it might not be getting the best out of the team. So I assume that the thought was that you might be better off trying to forge a better team collective rather than trying to appease your best player, who, for all his brilliance and all his goals, doesn't very often inspire the team to a higher level and to meet his high standards.
Well, it looks like now the next step for the Polish national team, obviously this loss to Finland, chances probably aren't too great, but we'll see where it goes from here. John Carter, thanks for joining us. And that concludes this edition of World News. Thank you for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.